When I was about 7 years old, my mom got sick and things just went downhill from there. Unfortunately, we found out that she was diagnosed with cancer. So I remember having to help look after my mom, look after my brothers. Because of the way my mom's passing was, I was not able to even attend her funeral. They took her body to Nigeria. So I'm now in this family home, which is my father's house. The experience there was really bad. Physical abuse, emotional abuse from his wife. She would hit me, she would strangle me, threaten me with saying she's gonna kill me. That night when I slept, it was almost like a weight was lifted off my shoulder. I didn't realize that, oh my gosh, unforgiveness was really causing me to not sleep well, it really stole my peace. And I just felt like the Lord was now dealing with different areas of my life. So it's like, I want to take on a healing journey. No, you've gone through so much, but I want to heal you. Hi, my name is Seyi, and this is my testimony. So God has been so amazing. I've really experienced the true love of God, and the best way for me to describe my life is that God loved me back to life. I didn't really have a great start in life, and it started right from before I was even born, but I didn't realize that until much later. So my mom got pregnant with me, but unfortunately my dad didn't want to be with her. And so my mom ended up having me by herself. A few years later, she got married and they started their own family. One thing I noticed during the marriage was her husband didn't really accept me as his own, and whenever they had arguments or there was issues in their marriage, I would constantly hear the word omale, which means bastard in Yoruba. But I used to wonder, why does he call me omale? I didn't understand what that meant, but many years later I found out why that would be eventually, but at that point I didn't know, and I just used to wonder what's going on. Whenever they had arguments, I used to wonder why through things that were said, I would be referred to as a bastard. Unfortunately, during the marriage, there was a lot of domestic violence, there was unfaithfulness, and it was quite a toxic environment. I remember just being a little girl, always scared. I used to always see my mom just always sad, in pain, and I guess without me realizing as a child, I just used to equate love with pain. And then when I was about 7 years old, my mom got sick and things just went downhill from there. And unfortunately, we found out that she was diagnosed with cancer. So I remember having to help look after my mom, look after my brothers. At this point, I had two brothers as well. She ended up having two boys in the marriage. Yeah, it was just a very interesting time growing up with my mom. And I remember every time she'd be on the phone crying or sharing her pain with her friends or her family back in Nigeria. And I just used to, I don't know, I just don't remember my mom being happy as a child. And so I guess without me realizing, that brought some sort of pain for myself. Her health deteriorated and she got admitted into hospital October 1997. While my mom was in hospital, me and my brothers ended up having to stay at quite a few people's houses. Her husband had to work, and I guess there were other things that were going on in the marriage that I guess caused a lot of issues that I wasn't aware of at the time. But the thing is, I remember being so unstable in terms of where we will be staying. And then we'll go and see my mum in the hospital after school. And I remember one of the visits that I had with my mum, when I went to visit my mum, her best friend at the time was saying, you need to tell Seyi the truth. And so I guess at this point, I was told to sit down, and they told me that the person I thought was my father, which is my mom's husband at the time, isn't my dad, and I have somebody else, that my surname is Jenyo. And I remember being 8 years old at the time, so I just turned 8 not too long after, and I was like, oh, it makes sense why he calls me bastard. And so it's like from that day I was thinking, wow, like, so I have another dad. And obviously my mom didn't tell me that, and I guess she was trying to protect me. My mom's health once again kept deteriorating in hospital, and eventually on Christmas Day, unfortunately, she passed away. And I remember I was at an auntie's house when we got the call to come to hospital, and obviously I saw everyone was sad, and I remember looking at the person I thought was my dad, and he said, your mom has gone to heaven. And I remember one of the questions I used to ask my mom was like, when people die, where did they go? And she says, to heaven. And so I remember like feeling numb, and just like the taste in my mouth just disappeared, and I was just like, wow, is it really true that my mom's dead? So I remember them taking us into the room that she was in, and I saw that. I remember as a child I was so scared to just even go close to her because I saw that my mom died in pain. And I remember just thinking, my mom was a Christian. Like she loved God. In fact, she actually had the Bible in her hand. Like I remember that image comes back to me, and I'm just like, wow, like God, as a child, I prayed that help my mom get better, and she didn't. So I feel like without realizing, that level of disappointment was a seed at that point when I lost my mom. So Christmas, obviously, since then, 1997 has never has never really been what Christmas would normally be. You know, normally it's a season of joy, happiness, gifts, family. But I really struggled with Christmas for many years after that. And so after my mom passed away now, one of the things that my mom actually requested was that she didn't want me to stay with her husband just because of the things that were happening in their marriage. There was unfaithfulness and there was issues, and she didn't feel like I'll be safe in with them. So she basically requested that, you know, whatever happens to me, I don't want Seyi to stay here. So I guess her friends and family members um, had to decide what's going to happen with Seyi now that my mom's passed away. And so at this point, I was still moving from house to house and still trying to figure out where they're going to put me. So then eventually they'll say, you know what, her dad needs to take take responsibility. And obviously at this point, I've never met my biological father. So they got in contact with one of my mom's friends who knew my dad and got in contact with him. And I remember aunties coming around telling me and encouraging me basically to basically, you know, encourage me to go and live with my dad. Obviously, once again, I don't know who this man is. But they said, you know, he's doing well in life. He'll look after you, you know, when you're 18, you'll get a car. Like, obviously, my dad clearly had some sort of prestige and he had money, as people would refer to at the time. And so as an 8-year-old, it was literally like a month and a bit after my mum passed away, I went to live with my dad and his family. And obviously at this point, my dad's married, he's got children as well. And so I've now, not only have I lost my mum, but now I'm in a new house somewhere in East London, not like knowing who these people are, which obviously are my siblings, but I was still, I guess, dealing with grief and shock. And because of the way my mum's passing was, it was the fact that I was not able to even attend her funeral. They took her body to Nigeria. So there was just so much things there's a lot of decisions that were made at the time that just didn't favor the children, if I'm being honest. And at this point, I was split away from my own two brothers. So it just seemed like this new life and my world had literally turned upside down. So I'm now in this family home, which is my father's house. And the experience there was really bad. Like, you know, I got abused. I experienced neglect, and yeah, physical abuse, emotional abuse from his wife. And she would hit me, she would strangle me, threaten me with saying she's gonna kill me. Like the promises that they gave me, where I would be able to like speak to like my family or people that I knew, in Hackney. So I grew up in Hackney. I was born and raised in Hackney, but at this point I was now somewhere else in East London, and they gave me a list of numbers I can call to like keep in touch with my mum's friends and the people that I knew um, as a child. And so all of that stuff got stripped away, and I literally was in this place where I felt like I was in hell. You know, I was treated very differently. I remember not being able to eat, like, I remember not eating things that the family would eat. And, you know, I lost a lot of weight. You know, the hair that I had done going there, I don't remember my hair being done often, basically. So if you saw the way I looked, I started to look malnourished, and basically you could see that neglect was there. I remember even going to school and they put me in a class with people with special needs. And at the time, obviously, um, I didn't understand, but I realized that I think because of the grief and the shock of my mom's passing, I clearly became mute and I didn't say much. So I wonder if they thought I might have had some special needs. And I remember my sister, who is my biological dad's daughter, were in the same year group, and she was in a different class to me. And I used to wonder, like, why have they put me here? And they put her in a different class. But obviously, as a child, I was just still figuring out what was going on. But I remember that I didn't like this new place that I was at. You know, I didn't feel like I belonged. I was treated differently. I was physically abused. Yeah, and then it got to a point where she threatened that she's going to kill me, and if I tell my dad the things that goes on in the house, that you know, I'm going to get in trouble. So I just kept everything to myself. And I just used to be so sad and just think, oh, how is this my life? And because she kept threatening to kill me, I thought to myself, well, I don't want to die. Like, you know, I'm only 8. So I had the courage. I don't know where the courage came from, but about 3-4 months later, I said, I want to go back to where you picked me up from. And obviously they picked me up from Hackney, where I was temporarily staying at the time. So they sat me down and they recorded um, me to say that I said I want to go back, so that it's evidence to say that I'm the one that wants to go back rather than them bringing me back. And I remember even during a time while I was at my biological dad's home, um, I don't know what it was, where maybe it was a threat that I was actually my dad's first child. The His wife wasn't accepting of that, and maybe, you know, with the culture, it could be something of not wanting the first child to get inheritance, all that kind of stuff. That's what was my assumption at the time anyway. So I remember being even taken to the hospital at one point to get blood tests. And I don't know, I think from the conversations I was hearing, it was like they were trying to do a DNA test to actually see if I'm my dad's child. But obviously, it was all crazy. But at the end of the day, I managed to get the courage to say, I want to go back to Hackney. And so they took me back to Hackney. So they took me back to my mum's best friend's house. And when they saw me, they were like, so disheartened, thinking this is not the child we gave you. And so then there was a lot of arguments and stuff there. Told me to go downstairs. I went downstairs and I just heard my dad and his wife, as well as my mum's friend and her husband, having arguments about this is not the child we gave you, what did you do to her, type of thing. Anyway, at that point now, I'm now staying at my mum's best friend's house, and they had to decide, okay, what they're going to do with me. Do I go to my mum's family's in Nigeria, or do I go to my mum's sister in America, or do I stay with another auntie? So they looked at different options as to where I could be placed. I guess my mum's best friend, she decided that she will take me in her family home, as it was the most stable at the time. So from that day, I had no connection with my dad again, and then my life started again. Like, I just felt like it was a fresh new start. I was more stable, you know. My mum's best friend's family was now my family, and you know, they put me into a school, and life just carried on. And obviously, I remember just being a child, missing my mom, and just still, you know, crying every night, just thinking like, why is this my life? But I guess this temporary place of stability just gave me some sort of peace that, you know what, things are going to be okay. A few years later, me and my family, my new family now, we moved to Nigeria for a few years, and I lived with their family. And, you know, as amazing as it was, I also felt a type of way where I just always felt like I didn't belong. Like, I felt like, because I didn't look like everyone, and you know, I had a different body shape and I looked different. I used to think I was ugly, and there were just so many things that I felt about myself that I just didn't fit in. I just always felt like I never fit in wherever I went. So I felt like that affected my self-esteem. But I really did enjoy living in Nigeria. And then, you know, after 3 years, when I was about 14, so I went to Nigeria when I was 10, came back when I was about 13, almost 14. And so we were back in London now, went back to my family home. And because in my family home, there was also issues in my now adopted mom's marriage. There was a lot of issues there, you know, unfaithfulness, domestic violence. So we were now in this home where I guess it did seem like a bit of a toxic environment to be in. But either way, did what we need to do. And I felt like at this point now, I'm now a teenager, and I felt like I was looking for every way to like feel loved. And I felt like the best way for me to feel loved was to be a good girl. So I would do a lot of domestics. So I'll clean the house, I'll cook, that was the only way I felt like I was recognized. And even academically, I realized that I would do so well in my academics, because that was the only time that I would get recognized and say, oh, well done, Seyi. Oh, you know, that was the only time I felt like I was seen or I was loved. Or so I felt like in me being good or doing good things, that was the way to get love. So I felt like I was constantly earning it. So I felt like a big chunk of my teenage years and young adult life, I found myself really working to earn my love, basically. So it got to a point where through secondary school now, I'm doing really well, did really well with my GCSEs. But like I said, in the home, it was quite toxic, because my adopted dad, he was quite horrible to me. In fact, he was horrible to the family, but I guess from my personal experience, I just felt like he had something against me. So I would feel like he will emotionally abuse me. I will get physically abused. And then unfortunately, when I was about 16, he molested me, and that really broke me because I did feel like over the years there was things that he was doing to me that was very uncomfortable, and it really broke me, where I felt like he now actually tried to do something with me. But I'm so thankful I was able to say no, and because I said no, it's like it now caused him to be even harsher towards me, and made me feel like I wasn't beautiful, made me feel like I wasn't, you know, worth being in the family. I don't know, it was just weird. There was just this thing where it was just always horrible to me in a really nasty way. So I guess for me, in my head, there's many times I felt like I wanted to run away, or I wanted to kill myself. I wanted to just get out of this, what I felt like was a mess. Like even going to school for me I felt like school was a safe place for me than it was at home. And so I had issues with my weight, and I just felt like the things from my childhood just started to show up in my thinking, in my attitude, in, I won't say my attitude, but more so the way I thought about my life, the way I saw people. I just felt like I was constantly living to be appreciated and loved and approved. It was just a very weird space. But I remember just always, whenever I had time alone, I would just hate my life. Like just think of how much I hate my life, and just wish that, why is this happening to me? But then there was just this determination that I'm going to make it in life. No matter what happens to me, I'm going to make it in life. By this point, obviously, I felt like I didn't really have any religion. So I didn't have any belief in anything per se. Like I knew that there was a God, but I think for me, in the household that I grew up in, where, this is now my adopted family, there were, the family was Muslim. And obviously I know my mom was Christian. So it's almost like we didn't really do anything. Yes, there's a God. There was nothing that we were really doing. And sometimes we'll do, Muslim things, and sometimes we'll go to church. It's a bit weird. Either way, it was just a case of for me, I didn't have like a relationship with Christ. So I felt like me trying to earn the love that I end up getting was through works, was through doing things. And when I got my GCSE results, I did really well. And, once again, I'm so used to getting approved and appreciated whenever I do well, that when I got home, I remember my adopted dad, he was the one at home, and he just said a really horrible comment that just kind of broke me. And it almost thinks, what more do I need to do to earn your love? And so at that point, I just said, forget being good. And so when I got to college, I decided to be, I guess, rebellious. I decided to quote unquote be bad and chill with the cool people. And I actually felt like a level of acceptance in this time where not being good didn't do me any favors. So let me try and be bad and see what life is about. So at that point, I would like bunk lessons. I started smoking weed, started talking to boys. I just, at that time it felt good because I was like, yo, like for so long, I've wanted to feel like I belong somewhere, but with the crew I was chilling with, it almost felt like this was the place where I was finally accepted. And then unfortunately that carried on, and I ended up failing my A levels, which to no surprise, I was missing my lessons. I wasn't as focused as I was just wanting to enjoy my life now. And so in my head, my exit strategy was to go to university so that I can leave the house. In my head, I literally thought, Shay, just manage, like just get through these years. As much as you want to run away, I didn't want to run away because of how much I love my mom and my siblings. I didn't want to break their heart or bring more pain because, like I said, it was not exactly the healthiest of environments as well. So I kind of just stuck it up and thought, you know what, let me just go to uni. And when I go to uni, I'm good. Like I'm never coming back, kind of thing. So when I failed my A levels, I was like, rah, my exit strategy is actually at stake. And so I remember having to call, lots of universities to see like, do you have space? Do you have space? And at that point I had applied to do radiotherapy and oncology. And the reason why I decided to do this was because I always wanted to be in the medical field. And obviously after losing my biological mom to cancer, I thought, you know what, let me do a job where I can help people who are, who are going through the things that my mom went through, and maybe I can make a difference in these people's lives. So it seems a bit backwards because you're thinking you want to run away from the very thing that caused you pain. But I don't know, in my heart, I just wanted to be in that environment to be able to help, people get better from the disease. So at that point, I had got into the university, but it was a conditional offer. So me failing meant obviously I couldn't go into the universities that accepted me originally. So I literally started calling around unis and started applying to even go and do drama. I'm not even one who likes to act. And I felt like whatever it was to get me out of the house, that's what I wanted to do. But luckily I thought, let me just call the university that I actually wanted to go to and see if there's any like other options that I can have. And I remember calling them and they were really thankful that I had called them, because they said like, Shay, we saw that you didn't get your grades, but because you were one of our strongest candidates, we really want to offer you a foundation degree. And then from there, you can get transferred into radiotherapy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I'll take it. So for me, I remember before leaving college, like I was like, there's no way I'm going back home without like a solution to the issue that I had. So I went back home and obviously told my family that I failed my A levels, but I've now got into my university through a different route by doing a foundation degree. So obviously I was now preparing to like preparing to start this new life, and it felt like I was about to embark on this journey of freedom. Like, oh my gosh, I'm out of this toxic environment. I get to live my life now. So that's kind of how I felt. And so when I got to university, I went to university with the same rebellious energy, and I was hanging around with the wrong people. Like literally, I would go clubbing, still smoking weed. Now, at this point, I'm now hanging around with guys, and at this point, I had lost weight. So obviously, weight was an issue with me in my later teens. But then when I got to university, I had lost weight. I started to feel like, oh, I'm looking nice. I started to feel a little bit confident in the way I looked, because for most of my teenage years, I always felt ugly. And so when I started to get attention from guys and people would say, oh, you got a banging body, you look nice, da 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 da, it got to my head, because I'm thinking no one's ever like given me compliments. No one's ever said I'm beautiful. So that, unfortunately, I felt like that was like a trap for me to kind of like fall in the hands of the wrong guys. And so when I was 19, I lost my virginity. And I remember in my heart, like, even though, like I said, I wasn't religious per se, I always felt like I wasn't gonna do that until like I'm in a relationship or like I'm married per se. And because obviously at the time I was around people who were doing those things, and I just felt like I held myself. But then, like I said, all it took was for someone to pinpoint at something that I guess I had avoided. And the words I was told, like, I care for you, I love you, or I guess in the time I'm there hearing I care for you, and then I'm seeing it as you love me. So that unfortunately opened the door for me to like give my virginity away. And I felt like that relationship really caused me a lot of pain down the line when I found out that, oh, actually this person is in a relationship. And I'm like, what? Like, it broke my heart, because I thought that I became attached to this person. Like, I thought this is the person I'm going to marry, this is the person I'm going to do life with, like this is someone I feel a connection with. But obviously that was not the case. And then so my heart got broken when I found out that he doesn't want me. He only used me for what he wants to get from me. And so I felt like I was just in a really I was still feeling rebellious per se, but then I guess other relationships came in, and then another guy he just was very overprotective over me. He was like, yo, where you at? Where are you? And no one's ever checked for me like that. And so far I felt like, without realizing, it seemed like a rebound, but then at the same time, I did like the fact that he's always calling me, where are you? Oh, are you back home? Are you this? And that really meant a lot to me, because I'm thinking, like I said, I never felt like I was anyone's priority. Ever since I lost my mom, I felt like I was never anyone's priority. So for someone to keep checking for me and all that kind of stuff, I felt like that drew me into this particular relationship. So I ended up being in this relationship with this guy, and hanging around with his friends and this group of people who really and truly, when I look back, it wasn't exactly the right company that I was keeping. We would go out, drink, people would be doing stuff. So I was with this guy for the majority of my university, and he also was, not he. It's funny because in my head I felt like I was in a relationship with him. I was like giving him like wifey benefits when really and truly he hadn't claimed me. And so I realized that okay, this guy's doing things with other people, but because when I look back at my background, and I saw that the women I looked up to, I loved, they were in marriages where their husbands were unfaithful. And I thought, okay, well, if my moms can, stay in those kind of relationships, then why can't I? Because I guess to them, I saw that as they were like my role models. So, I felt like, what makes me think that I can have a guy who is willing to just have me by myself, type of thing. But obviously, what I didn't realize, that it was causing me a lot of pain, and so many things happened in the years following that. at this point, I nearly started to fail my degree. So yes, I passed a foundation course, I got into radiotherapy, you know, I was doing well, but then I realized that my childhood trauma just started to catch up with me in my early 20s. And so I felt like I just lost myself. I was like, how did I get here? Like, I just felt the pain I felt in my heart was just so deep that I couldn't describe it. Like, the best way I could describe it was that my heart was in a coma. Like, I literally felt I was alive but dead on the inside. And I just like had this reality check and thought, Seyi, I know you've gone through so much, yeah, but you always had it in yourself that you're gonna make it no matter what. Like, so, but right now, everything that's going on in your life is not reflecting your desire to make it and prove the people wrong that has done you wrong, or who have caused you pain, or the people that you've loved pain. So I remember in my second year of the degree, I just literally at this point had failed all my assessments, my exams, coursework, and I had to take resits. And then in my head, I was deciding that, do I just drop out of uni and just go and start working, or do I carry on and just give this thing a shot? And so that's when I decided, I was just like, you know what? I remember that day looking at my grades, and I just broke down and I cried and I said, God, help me. You know, at this point, I tried the good way. I was trying to do things myself, of earning people's love. Then I thought, let me try the cool way, quote unquote, the bad way. And I felt a form of acceptance for many years, but not realizing that it actually dug a deeper hole for me for many years. And so I found myself in a really deep hole of darkness and just pain and wounds of my experiences in life so far. And so at that point, I cried out to God. I said, you know what? I've tried good, I've tried bad. Let me try God. And I remember, like, look, my mom, before she died, she said, like, she believed in God all the way to the end. So I remember going to a campus fellowship. I remember, like, the friends that I used to go clubbing with, like, you know, we'll go clubbing, we'll do these things, and they was like, oh, Shay, come to church. And I just used to like say no, because I didn't feel right knowing that I'm living a life that doesn't reflect God's. So I just literally stayed away from the whole church thing. But obviously at this point I said, God, help me. At this point I really needed help. Like I literally felt like I was lost. So I went to the campus fellowship now, and I remember it was a worship session, and I just remember sitting there and I just started crying. I was weeping. I just said, God, help me. God, help me to just pass my degree. That's all I want. Help me. And I remember just this feeling in my heart where the pain that I was feeling, it just felt that little bit less. And I just thought, maybe God can help me, you know? So at that point, that's when I decided to just start cutting people off. And I just thought, you know what, let me try this God thing. And so I stopped talking to the people that I was hanging around with. You know, I did my exams. I, you know, was able to pass it and just get the, you know, bare minimum, but able to get me to my final year. My final year was a very lonely one, because at this point now, I don't have friends. And the friends I do have, obviously, like, they weren't as many as they were before. But like I said, I was on this new path of, let me just do things, you know, differently. So focused on my degree, and you know, started doing my work. And then I literally realized that, wow, you know, things are starting to change. Like, my heart was starting to feel less and less painful. And I just thought, let's just do this thing. And so by the grace of God, I actually passed my degree. And not only did I pass my degree, I actually got a job before I finished uni. And so for me, I was just like, wait, God, like, you answered my prayer. Like, I didn't deserve this. Like, I was living a life of sin. I didn't deserve this. I'm so used to earning anything I get. So all I asked you was for me to pass my degree, and all of a sudden, like, you gave me a job as well. So I ended up getting a radiotherapy job, and at that point, that's what drew me in. I thought, who is this God who answers prayers, and I didn't have to, like, work? I didn't, quote unquote, have to work for it or earn it. And so that's kind of what, like, allowed me to say, you know what, I'm willing to go deeper. So at this point, obviously, I've still got my worldly ways and all that kind of stuff, like, but I know that I'm trying things differently. So it's now when I finished graduating, and I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, I've graduated, I'm working now. I said, I'm going to take this God thing seriously. So, you know, I dedicated my life to Christ fully at the age of 23. And by the grace of God, I've not turned back since. And honestly, it's been a journey. That's where my journey with Christ began, where I'm like, okay, who's this God who allowed me to pass my degree and get me a job, and I didn't have to work for it, I didn't earn it? Like, what kind of manner of love is this? So then I just started this journey. I got my first job in Cambridge. And so that was almost like another lonely year where I'm by myself. I'm in this new career. I'm getting to know this God, this journey of Christ. And I started, going to a new church, serving in the choir and just doing all these things. And I just loved it. I loved, like, oh my gosh, I've got new friends, people who are, also in Christ. And, I felt like the Lord was now dealing with me. So there was just things that started to change in my heart, like the desires for the things of the world just started to fade away, and the music I would listen to that, I wasn't able to listen to it anymore. And I remember the Lord speaking to my heart and just saying, look, I need you to forgive. And I'm like, forgive? He said, you've got so much resentment, bitterness, and anger towards people who have done you wrong and who have done the people you love wrong. There were just so many hurts that I kind of carried on along the way, the pain that I got from the different relationships that I was in, the heartbreaks. So it was them ones where I said, okay, Lord, okay, what does this look like? And I remember going to church that week, and they were talking about forgiveness, and I thought, oh gosh, God is really speaking to me. And so I got this, I guess, revelation that Jesus died on the cross for me for a sin that he didn't commit. Like, he took on the sins of the world. For that reason, like, that's why I'm forgiven. So for me, it dawned on me, and I thought, wow, it sobered me, like, who am I not to forgive people if God forgave me, kind of thing. So that's how I went on that journey of forgiveness. And I remember just, in my time of prayer, just releasing everyone who had done me wrong. And that night when I slept, it was almost like a weight was lifted off my shoulder. I didn't realize that, oh my gosh, unforgiveness was really causing me to not sleep well, it really stole my peace. So for me, I was literally like, okay, cool. And I just felt like the Lord was now dealing with different areas of my life. So it's like, he was like, I want to take on a healing journey. And I'm like, okay, that, you've gone through so much, but I want to heal you. And so I felt like the best way for me to describe what God has done for me at this point was he loved me back to life. And so my journey just started where I just wanted to get healed from my past, from the trauma that I had experienced. And so God started to deal with grief. He started to deal with resentment, abandonment. He started to deal with bitterness and, rejection and all that kind of stuff. So as I was on that journey, he was just unraveling different areas. Like, so it started with just highlighting like my behavioral patterns and my dysfunctional cycles, the way I thought, the way I saw myself. And so he was challenging me every single time. And it was almost like a form of revelation that I want to make you whole. I want to heal you. And so as I embarked on that journey, I remember in 2014, I went to a retreat. And that retreat is what I feel like changed the trajectory of my life, Pure Hearts Retreat in the UK. And I felt like I experienced this thing where I remember being there for that weekend, being prayed for, getting spoken. Like, I got words of prophecy of the things that God wants to do in my life. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I felt like this is where my destiny was like kind of like unleashed. And so at that point, I just felt like my love and my desire for God, or the things of God, just started to increase all the more. And then I felt like he changed my circle, and actually I had the right people that I felt like the Lord wanted me to do life with on the journey ahead, for where he was taking me. And so I felt like through that, it just allowed me to see that, okay, this healing thing is what God wants for me. So through dealing, he showed me like the root of where a lot of my issues came from. And he showed me that rejection was the root of all the issues, the identity issues I had, was the root of the pain and just the way I saw life. And the Lord showed me that rejection came from the womb. So the moment that my biological dad rejected my mum, the rejection got passed on to me. And obviously when I was born, it's almost like rejection became a theme in my life where I wasn't accepted fully. Like, it was very obvious that in different family settings, it was very obvious that I just didn't fit in. There were just so many things I had to deal with that really made me feel rejected. And, even in school, I realized that I became not even just school, in life, I was a people pleaser because I was just trying to earn people's love. But obviously God was like, you can't live for me and expect to live for the approval of man. It's just not going to work. So like I said, on this healing journey carried on. And so he started to deal with the rejection. He started to deal with fatherhood. Like, obviously now at this point, my dad now found me on Facebook. And so one of the things in terms of identity was that I never used to put my real name online because I didn't want people to know that I was adopted. I didn't have my real family around me. And once again, when I think about it, I'm the only child of my mum and dad. So even no matter where I was, I never really had anyone who, I guess, had my surname, other than my dad's family. But obviously I didn't have a relationship with them. So when I changed my name to Seyi Jenyo online after I graduated, I feel like that's kind of what made my dad find me on Facebook. And I remember while I was, this was like 23, so this is about 15 years later now since I had heard from him. He messaged me saying, "Hi Shay, it's your dad, da, 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 da." And I remember being so scared, thinking, oh my gosh, he found me. And I remember even growing up, I did think, I want to know my dad. I want to know my dad's family. Like, you know, when you get to a place in life, you want to know where you come from. But I never really, I guess, got connected to him in any way. But obviously when he reached out to me, I was now like a bit afraid to say that, like to tell anyone that, oh, my dad has reached out to me. So at the time I felt safe to like speak to one of my aunties who was also one of my mom's really good friend. I responded to the message, and God reminded me, this is why I wanted you to forgive, because I want you to receive your dad. So I was like, okay, cool. So when I got in contact with my dad, we met up, we spoke, and obviously I had, I guess, thought that this journey would be one where God is trying to restore fatherhood for me. And it felt like I finally had a form of belonging. My mom's not alive. Obviously, I didn't know my dad. And it's like, it just gave me this point of reference when it comes to identity. That journey with my dad started. And, you know, I would see him here and there. He wasn't based in the UK. He was based in Nigeria. So whenever he was in the UK, I would, you know, meet up with him. He'll call me. And so, but what I realized was that my relationship with my dad was one where it's like him being in my life, I felt like it caused me more pain than it did when he wasn't. Because imagine if someone is not there, you already feel rejected and abandoned. But when they're not there, you just kind of have the feeling. But when someone's actually present in your life and you actually have a tangible relationship with the person, and they're literally exhibiting the same things where, you know, certain things have been promised, it hasn't been fulfilled, you know, I felt like I almost, it sounds bad, but I kind of actually felt like I was a side chick, because it's like he didn't want his family, like his wife and his other children to know. Yes, I met with my brother, but I felt like everyone else in the family was not aware of his contact with me. So it's almost like whenever he called me, it was almost like on a sly thing. And I just felt like, I don't like this. So I remember, like, obviously saying to God, like, God, I don't feel like this man loves me. I don't feel like he cares for me, you know, and I felt like it started to build up some sort of bitterness in my heart again. And so when I realized that my issues with my dad started to affect my relationship with God, and obviously at this point I'm in a place where I'm like, I don't want anything to get in between me and my relationship with God. And I started to see that bitterness was now starting to affect that. And God was saying, go and speak to your dad, go and speak to your dad and tell him how you feel. And so I remember having to speak to my dad and really tell him and say, look, I feel like you don't care for me. I feel like you don't, you know, I feel like an orphan. Like, even though like you're alive and my mom's not alive no more, I still feel like an orphan. Like, why is it that you don't care for me like you care for your other children? And, you know, I guess for the first time I was able to be vulnerable to him and literally share my heart. But then it almost seemed like, you know, he apologized and it felt like, okay, things will change. And unfortunately, years later, it just seemed it was just the same thing. And so for me, it was them ones where I just literally had to accept that, you know what, God, what you've done, I felt like what God was doing, my journey of fatherhood was showing me that even my earthly father, so the people that I called father, my biological dad, my dad who I thought was my dad when he was married to my mom, then obviously my adoptive father who caused me a lot of pain as well. I felt like all of them just caused me pain. So I realized that this is what was kind of not allowing me to kind of break into a deeper relationship with God, because I was seeing God through the lenses of my earthly fathers, or earthly father figures, I guess. And I guess that encounter I had with my dad, when I told him that, look, I don't feel like you love me. I don't feel like you care for me. And so him apologizing, it's almost like in that meeting, the Lord opened my eyes, like the scales came off my eyes, where God just allowed me to just see him as a human being who's also flawed. And so I literally got that revelation. I thought, wow, God, you used the journey of you bringing my dad back in my life, not only just to kind of give me, I guess it was even grace to just kind of even, because I know that not many people have the opportunity to actually meet their biological fathers. It was just the idea that, oh, wow, like you wanted to show me that I do belong somewhere, like this is who I came from. However, ultimately, you are my father. So me looking at my dad, I literally saw him as a mere human being, and actually seeing that actually you're flawed, and actually I had to extend grace and know, like, you know what? No one's perfect, and I have to accept that you're not going to give me what I desire and what I want. And so it's almost like I felt like in the spirit, my focus just went up, and I said, God, I accept you as my own father. Like, you are my father, you're my mother, you're my everything. And so I think when I sealed that deal with God and actually say, you know what, I want to embark on this journey of you teaching me teaching me your fatherhood. So I felt like God was like, it's almost like I felt like God had got to my heart and actually made me understand that this is where the journey he's got me on. And obviously at this point in time, I don't actually have a relationship with my dad anymore, but it felt like it wasn't in a harsh way per se. I've forgiven my dad, but it just didn't work. It just wasn't going the way I had thought it would. And I think I nearly idolized the idea of my form of restoration will be, oh, God will restore my relationship with my dad, and I know God, and I know where I came from. But that hasn't been my story. But really and truly, more than anything, God now said, I want to use your story for my glory. And I'm like, I want you to write a book. And I'm like, you want me to write a book? And so I'm thinking, oh no, that's too much. Like, I'm gonna have to like go into detail of what I've gone through, because at this point many people didn't know my real life. Like I feel like for most of my life I'd lived a lie. So many people, it was until I literally was on this journey with Christ that God had to say, you can't keep living a lie. You need to tell people what your real life is. So people didn't know I was adopted. People didn't know I had lost my biological mom. People didn't know about all the stuff I had gone through. And so he said, I want you to write a book because this is going to be a source of hope for many. And so for me at this point, I'm like, oh, okay, God, you need to help me. And so the name of the book is called Love Back to Life. And really and truly, that is my story, where he really did love me back to life. And God wanted me to just share my testimony of how he loved me back to life and how I found hope in brokenness. And so when I wrote my book, that was a journey in itself, where God used me writing the book as another form of healing for me, where I had to go into areas of my life where I had like kind of dug deep and didn't want to confront, and he made me confront those issues. So writing the book, just there was a lot of tears, there was a lot of like revelation of, oh my gosh, okay, this is the source of this. Then he was just showing me so much of the work he's done in my heart and what he's doing and what he would like to do. But more than anything, he just wanted to show people that there's hope. And so when the book came out, obviously at this point, my family now found out that my adoptive family now obviously found out that I put some details in there that obviously, quote unquote, I would say it almost seemed like a breach of confidentiality. But one thing I realized, I had to be obedient to God because it was my story. And God had to show me that all I need to do is be obedient and he will deal with the consequences. So I realized that God has said, I want to use your story. That's what I've chosen. And as much as I don't want to, I'm like, why is it that in everything that you want me to do, why is it that it's my story that you want to use? Like, you could use something else, but it feels like I'm putting my dirty laundry out there for the world to see. But God is showing me that, no. I want to show people what I was able to do with your past. And that is your testimony to show that I'm able to make something out of nothing and also restore what was lost, kind of thing. When I wrote the book, it opened doors to an opportunity for me to be able to share my story. More people, there were so many testimonies of people, finding hope, wanting to start their healing journey, wanting to deal with all the stuff that they've gone through, whether it was abuse, resentment, pain, anger, fear. I remember I had a lot of fear as well, and the Lord had to deal with that. And I remember the revelation that God gave me that perfect love casts out fear. And I realized that, oh my gosh, if perfect love casts out fear, it means that I'm not perfected in love. So I was like, God, perfect me your love so much so that fear has no place to stay in my heart. And so I always remember that that's how God was just helping me to deal with different areas of fears in my life. Now my story's out there, I'm having to own it now. But I felt like the journey of even just sharing my story always came with like backlash, where I always felt like, oh, my family are going to hate me. And to be honest, they didn't. I'm so thankful. There were, yes, we had some hard conversations, but I literally for the first time was able to say to my family, I said, look, for so long, I was trying to be loyal and not betray the family or betray people that were in my life in the past at the expense of my life. But what I'm seeing, that this is what God wants to use, I can't say no to God and have to be obedient, that it's going to give people hope, and people are going to start their healing journey. They're going to come to know God as the lover of their soul. And I realized that even me being obedient to God, it brought healing in my family home. And so at this point, obviously now the setting in our family, my adopted dad is no longer around. So it's just me and my siblings and my mum. So we've been on this journey of healing as well, where God has really used my journey to really just help, I guess, instill my siblings and my mom on their healing journey as well. So realizing that God has chosen to use my life just so that he can help bring about hope and healing in the lives of many around me, and the ones that he sent me to as well. And so now, I guess, what I realized, that God now started to unveil. So as he continued to heal me, he started to unveil my purpose of what he's called me to be. And I'm like, he says, I want you to share the message of hope and healing to many. And so I was like, okay, but it's through your story. I'm like, okay, I hear that, Lord, but what does that look like? And so I realized that he birthed, he put a passion for young people was birthed in me, and a passion for women in general to heal well was birthed in me because of my experiences. Young people was one thing because of the kind of childhood I had and the upbringing I had. It meant that I actually made a lot of mistakes in my adult years because of the things I went through. And so I remember wanting to be the person I needed as a teenager. All the stuff I was going through as a teenager, I couldn't speak to no one. I was going through all these suicidal thoughts. I was doing really horrible things to myself. I didn't have, my self-esteem was so low. I hated my life. I was living life to be approved by people. I just didn't live a life that was secured in a solid identity. And so God was like, I want you to help young people. I want you to help women. I want you to help women to heal well and to become authentically free. And I want you to help steward the transforming lives of young people. So I'm like, okay. So as I carried on my journey, I realized that God opened that door for me to be able to help young people, where he gave me a vision, which is called Not a Statistic Youth, dedicated to the well-being and personal development of young people, so that they can, so it pushes them towards a well-balanced and wholesome future. The kind of people I felt like God has called me to are people who in society are pretty much a statistic. So people from my background, people who have gone through brokenness, who have experienced trauma, who might have been in care or anything that could put them at a disadvantage. I guess the whole point of God giving me this vision was to help young people to know that they don't have to be a statistic, and that they can become something no matter what they've gone through, against all odds. So my passion to help women really was birthed from my own personal journey of healing, and just seeing that God actually wants us whole. He doesn't like us broken. Because of how much the ministry Pure Hearts changed my life, I felt like part of God's call for my life was to be part of this ministry, to help people for hearts to be restored back to the Father. So being part of the ministry, I've been able to allow the Lord to use the healing work he's done in me to help other people do the same. And it's just been a beautiful, transformative journey of just becoming whole in him. And I realized that I embarked on this journey of fatherhood in 2018. And so I had to experience what fatherhood was in a practical way. And so through that, I've learned God as my provider. I've seen him as my protector. I've seen him as my sustainer. I've seen him as my source. Like all these things he used to basically show his fatherhood, that the things I didn't receive in reality in my earthly fathers, he gave that all to me. And even though the journey hasn't been easy, it was allowing me to gain a revelation of God in such a unique way. And so I remember getting to a point where, God, I've been on this journey for so long, and I just feel like, when am I going to get to this place of quote unquote, I don't know if it's completion or like, being like not having any issues per se. And I felt like at one point I did feel like I was going to give up. I can't lie. I felt like I was going to give up. But I remember God saying to me, if you give up now, everything I've done so far, it's almost like you're going to forfeit it. And so he said, the reason, because at a particular point, it felt like some of the habits that I had in my past started to come back again. Like, there's some dysfunctional habits that I had, that I found myself, doing. And I just felt just tired of just this journey. Like the healing journey has been a long one, but I realized that it's been extensive because God, he's so intent on us being whole in him. And so I remember hearing so clearly the Lord say to me, I'm dealing with residue. I said, residue. He said, residue, so key that the same way Satan couldn't tempt Jesus to sin because he didn't have sin in him, is the same way I don't want you to have anything from your past that the enemy will use in your future. He said, where I'm taking you, I don't want the enemy to use anything from your past to bring you down. So I want to deal with residue. And it's funny because I feel like the place of residue has been the hardest part of the healing journey, but I've loved it because it's pruned me, it's broken me, it's changed me, it's transformed me to really, I guess, stick to the process of what this journey of healing really looks like, so that I can be all that God has created me to be. And so hence why, like I said, once again, it's birthed this passion to help women heal, but not just heal well, and actually stay on that journey. Because through my journey, I realized I can see why people don't heal well, because it's painful. You're going to have to face the pain that you went through again, but this time you're in God's safe hands. Like, what happened before, it's left an imprint of pain, but with no solution. But in God, he's brought about this pain for you to heal and bring a solution, kind of thing, and actually birth the things that he wants to birth in you. So I guess I'm a testament of God really, really transforming my life, where now what I do is like I help young people, you know, through my organization, Not Statistic Youth, where we help people from disadvantaged backgrounds. We help people who are seen as statistics and make them not become that against all odds. In the same way, I help women through the ministry of Pure Hearts Ministry, where we help women as well as through speaking engagements and just letting people know that God is faithful. He's a God of hope. He's a God of restoration. He's a God of transformation. And he cares so much about our soul being whole in him. And I pray that I'll continue to be on this journey of wholeness, of freedom, of healing, and just knowing that God is able to turn what the enemy meant for bad and turn around for good, and for my good, but ultimately for his glory. So I really do pray that, I don't know, through what I've shared, it does remind you that there is hope. I'm in a place where, like, my future's bright. Like, the things I have in my heart, I've got joy, I've got peace. I know my identity, my foundation is secure. I know God by the grace of, like, by his grace, I know him as Father. I know him, it's a relationship. This is not religion, it's relationship. I know God for my life. I've seen him move in so many ways. There's so many things he's done for me. Like, you know, obviously, I can't say all, but I can say and testify that, look, God is real, and he's shown and proved himself as faithful, that he doesn't fail, he doesn't disappoint. And obviously, I know that through losing my mom, through the abuse, through the abandonment, all these things could have made me feel like God does not love me. But actually, that's what the enemy used to try and not make me know God. But God has said, no, I'm going to turn this around for good and for my glory. So I pray that, you know, my testimony has blessed you, and, you know that God is truly able to love you back to life. And I pray that you're blessed. I want to use this opportunity to pray for anyone watching this who connects to my story, who has gone through similar experiences, you know, even if it's not even up to what I've been through, even more than what I've been through. I want to use this opportunity to pray for you. I pray that the Lord will touch your heart. I pray that you'll experience the love of the Father like never before. I pray that you will find a hope that you've never felt before. I pray that, you know, the things that caused you pain, the Lord will turn around for your good. He will turn it to purpose. I pray that you will realize that everything you've been through is not a waste, that God will use it for good. But I pray that you would endure the healing journey. I pray that you will stay on that journey of being processed by God, because he cares for you. He will never leave nor forsake you. Even if you don't have any parents, or you don't have family members or anyone, God, he will never forsake you. He will bring the right people with you. He, you know, he will bring the right friendships. You know, he did that for me. He restored my friendships. He restored he restored my life in so many ways. I pray peace over your mind. I pray fear will leave. I pray that God will perfect you in his love, so much so that fear has no place to stay in your heart, in the name of Jesus. And I pray more than anything that you'll come to know who you are in Christ. I pray that you will know that you have a reason for being here, that you weren't born by accident. You are not a mistake. The same way I thought I was a mistake, but God said, no, I brought you on this earth for a purpose. And I pray that you will recognize that you are born for a purpose, and you are born for such a time as this to be able to fulfill the things that God has for you. And I pray that you will know the things that God has called you to be. But more than anything, I pray that your heart becomes whole in him, that your soul, that you would be intentional about really working on the things that you've been through, so that you can actually overcome that and actually live a true life of freedom that's found in Christ. In Jesus' name, amen.